thanks for coming. Here we are again. We're going to review the budgets. We're going to vote on budgets.
We are.
First thing on the agenda is to approve updated meeting minutes of February 6th. Do we have a motion for that?
Move. Second.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Approve the meeting minutes of March 6th.
Move.
Thanks, Mo. Second. Thanks, Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, and then accept the meeting minutes of March 20th for review.
Moved.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Review and vote on fiscal year 26 budget for town meeting. So I think this is where we have a nice summary from David. Would you like to go through that with us?
Sure, so I'll go through it. So, good evening.
Good evening.
Another wonderful day. You know, it's nice, warm, sunny, and all that talk. We're not high today.
Yeah.
You haven't looked out the window, have you?
Well, just the opposite of all of that.
Okay.
In any event, you know, this is my 12th budget, and I will tell you this was the most difficult budget to put together in all of those years. We have a couple of pressures this year that we have not had, and I'm going to showcase exactly why the business plan in Massachusetts really just doesn't work, and why you're seeing so many other towns around us go for overrides,
Yeah.
and that we are not in that position, and I can explain why we're not, but like everybody else, eventually we're going to get to where everybody else is if some things don't change. So with that said, I'll give you a high review. This is basically the memo that I turned into the Board of Selectmen last night. I just had to tweak a couple of things, but it's 99% is the same. All department budgets are in. You have heard from all of them. I am at this point using a levy increase, which means that, you know, everybody was talking about Proposition 2.5. What that means is that you take your total amount of taxes that you did last year, you raise it at a certain percent, and technically you're usually capped at 2.5%. But we have not raised it 2.5% in any of the 12 years that I have been here. So that 2.5% continues to increase. So because we didn't use it, that becomes what they call excess levy capacity. So while other towns that need to go to, say, 3%, they have to go get a vote from the voters to do an override, we don't have to do that. We could actually go up almost 9% and not have to get an override because we've been so good about budgeting over the past decade. So with that said, in this budget, I am using an estimated raise of 2.75%. Now, that's not locked in because there's a lot of variables that will happen between now and fall. And this happens every year. Because a couple of years, I have budgeted a 2.5%, and we've only raised a 2, a 2.25, a 1.8, somewhere in that range. Because we are using today's state aid numbers, again, which we'll highlight in a moment, but the state never has all of their receipts done by July 1st, which they're constitutionally mandated to do, but they don't usually finish their budget until August or September. So until they finish their state aid, that has an impact. So you're going to see later in this presentation that the difference between, say, 2.5% and 2.75% is $70,000. It is likely that we could get a $70,000 increase in state aid between now and then, so that automatically lowers what the levy increase is. So we just don't know all those numbers today. But this is for budgeting purposes. So using 2.75%, our overall budget, including all budgets, including water, is up about 4.7%. And the year-to-year increase is $2.1 million. It's actually $300,000 less than it was last year. There are 4 major drivers to our budget increase. The school department, the benefits budget, which is really not discretionary, and the police and the fire departments. I highlight this because, of course, anybody on this committee, or I said to the selectmen last night, or a town meeting, can hold any budget and discuss any budget, but the reality is that you have almost 40 budgets. Only 4 of them make up 94%. So you want to quibble with any of the other 36 budgets that make up 6%, you're silly when you're talking about pennies. Right now, you're looking at almost a $50 million operating budget, and 6% of that increase is all the other budgets. So these are the major drivers. The town side budget, meaning that it excludes water, because remember, the town side budget is through taxes and fees. The water department is paid for through water rates, is up $2.2 million, about the same, just a hint, a little bit of a below last year. So again, a little bit trending in the right direction. We don't have real, like, these budgets are not going up year over year as a major driver in the aggregate. I fully funded just about all budgets. Could I make a case to reduce some budgets? Yes, I could. But I also could make a case to reduce the school budget. And I'm not going to try to reduce the school budget because, quite frankly, at town meeting, there hasn't been a lot of will to reduce the school budget. And I am not going to ask the town to balance a budget based on a couple of other departments when the school department is 50% of the budget. If the other departments feel pain, they should feel pain as well. They're not going to. That's okay. They have some real pressures. Like, I'm not being critical of them. They are the biggest driver of the budget. But if we can't cut that budget, I don't feel morally that I should be making the decision to cut other budgets. However, that's not my decision. These are all my recommendations to the board last night, and now it's before you today. I did have to make some increases in the budget, which again, I itemized for you so you see it. But the increases are tied, as I've always said to you, primarily to insurance
Yep.
and to the solid waste contract. So again, we'll itemize that in a minute. Finance Committee is fully funded reserve. We've done that multiple years. Fortunately, you've not had to use it, but I have not taken any money out of that, so you still have it. Again, I'm just gonna note the following, that the town side operating budget is up $584,000. So the non-school, all budgets combined, are up $584,000. So if you want to do some quick math, the first page said that police and fire were up 400. So all other budgets on the other towns is not even up 200 grand. That's not a lot of money. So I think a lot of our department heads are really, really reasonable in their requests. Again, I'm fully recommending the school committee budget, but I'm telling this committee, I've told the Board of Selectmen, and I'm not being arrogant when I say this, there is nobody in this town that knows your budget and your finances better than me. That is not sustainable. You cannot have a 7%, an 8%, and a 6% sequentially year after year after year in any one budget that makes up 50% of the budget. It's just not sustainable. But we'll fully fund it. They've obviously made a request. They believe that they need it, so I have fully funded that request in here. And also, I'm just letting you know that it's not just our local school, but it's also Southeastern Regional. That means just those two budgets make up 61% of your operational budget. That is operational. That is not your aggregate. If you want to look at your aggregate budget, which includes insurance and health insurance, those two budgets would make up over 70% of your budget. So again, that's why I don't feel comfortable cutting any of the other budgets. Now, here's where our real issue is, that when it comes to the revenue side, unfortunately, since Proposition 2.5 and the passage of the lottery, and then the 2019 Student Opportunities Act, and then the millionaire's tax, the state has sold us on the fact that we will be partners and we will provide local aid to help you support your budgets. But now let's look at the numbers. Our budget is actually decreased year over year on our net valuation of state aid. So if you take, because they do two things, they give us money and they charge us money. And the difference between those two, we actually went backwards $105,000 year over year. I have never seen that in 12 years here, and I've never seen that in 15 years working for two other towns. I have already reached out to our local state delegation. They have already been in contact with the state A&F, Administration and Finance. I said to her, it's got to be a mistake. I mean, as we go down to the next paragraph, Chapter 70 funds, and the school's always made a big deal about receiving a lot of money on this. That's only up 85 grand. Nobody can think that you can balance using only $85,000 on that, in that account. And we can talk about the federal government and what's going on there, and we know it's not good, you know, from a standpoint of receiving the aid and the grants that we're used to. But the passage of the millionaire's tax was sold to voters that 50% of it would go to infrastructure spending and 50% of it would go to education. That is entirely irrelevant of what's going on in DC. That's your local money.
State.
That's state money.
Yeah.
Last year, we were up $460,000 in that account. In the previous year, which was the first year that the Student Opportunities Act was fully funded, we were up 1.2 million. So I don't know how, now with the passage of the millionaire's tax, we jump all the way down to 85 grand. But that's where it's at. That's why I am hopeful that between now and the fall, that some of this is gonna shake out and that number's gonna increase.
But they did the same thing with the lottery money. When the lottery went in, it was supposed to go to certain buckets.
They do that with everything though, don't they?
I know.
So you're right. So the lottery was passed in the early 1990s, and it was passed under the. It was passed with the belief that all of that aid would 100% go back to local municipalities. But what they did in the legislation was that they said subject to appropriation. So they basically handcuffed themselves where they said, oh, well, in case we need some of it, we'll use it for other sources. So every single year, and I don't know what that percentage breakdown is, but I'm sure more and more percent of it is not going back to the towns, it's going to other sources.
Is that what the millionaire's tax says too, is subject to appropriation?
I don't believe so, but again, I don't know that. And of course, look, I'm not gonna get political, but I'm just gonna say the God's honest truth. Part of this, my frustration, is that this state, over the past 18 months, has spent $1.4 billion on helping people who are non-taxpayers. Again, I'm not gonna get into a political conversation about it, but my point is, that's $1.4 billion that is not going back to cities and towns at this point, that is aiding the people who are actually paying taxes in the state. So that obviously is having a financial pressure in Boston. I mean, that's the way it is. But you're feeling it.
Absolutely.
Our local aid is only up 17 grand. So the combined aid that is up, irrelevant of the charges, is only $100,000. So if you have to now find $2.2 million to fund your budget, that means 95% of your increase budget comes from you. Only 5% is being paid for by the state. And again, I'm really drilling this home because for way too many years, I've always heard, oh, the state will pay for it. Oh, the state will kick in. Oh, it's state money. It's actually not state, it's your money. They compelled you to pay it, and then they give it back to you, and then they're not giving it back to you. And now it's hurting. So that's part of the revenue picture. The second part of the revenue picture is local receipts. Local receipts is made up of excise tax, investment income on the money we have sitting in the bank, when you pay your transfer station sticker, all of those receipts all go into as what they call a general fund receipt. And that all comes in. And last year, we collected about 4.3 million. That was the second highest we've ever collected. You can see in 23 was higher. Before it was always in the $3 million. A lot of that is driven by new growth. So when you see new building in town, there's building permit fees, there are additional conservation commission fees, all of those fees skyrocketed during growth, which helped fund our receipts. I've historically budgeted this line much lower, and that's why we generate surplus cash. We call it free cash because it's the legal definition of it, but again, it's not free. It's just a difference between what we actually collected in receipts and what also department heads did not spend through the course of the year. Now, I would like to keep the budget at $3 million for receipts. I can't. This is the highest that I'm ever going to use in receipts to budget, and I'm using 3.6 million. So at first glance, you will say, yeah, but we brought in 4.3, we're good. But it's only a couple of years ago, we brought in less than that. And I can definitively tell you, looking at building permit receipts, our growth is slowing.
Yeah.
And it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that. We all see it, there's less growth that is going on.
So you're confident with this number?
I'm confident we'll make 3.6 million for this year.
Okay.
I am not confident that we will generate surplus. And that means that you will have a structural deficit going forward because you are balancing your budget with surplus. And if we don't generate surplus, you are getting into that pinch point going forward. So,
We're not using surplus to balance the budget though,
just
are we?
Yeah.
using 1.5 million to balance.
Of our free cash?
Yep.
For this year's budget?
Yep. Well, the one we're voting on.
This one,
So we have to use the free cash in order to balance?
yes, we did it last year too.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
And that, in the last sheet will show you that too. I sum up and I let you know that, quite frankly, at a 5.31% increase this year, it's a little bit lower than last year, so that's a positive. We have always taken $350,000 of free cash. When I started here in 2013, the selectmen tasked me with trying to figure something out to help everybody out with the school debt, because we had just bought out in the middle senior high school. So we reduced the budget always by $350,000, and that cumulatively has saved the taxpayers $4.2 million. That's $4.2 million you haven't had to pay because we've used that surplus. If we turn the next page, this answers Mary's question. What this shows is that even using $3.6 million in receipts and putting all departments and using a 2.75% raise, there's a $1.1 million shortfall. So you either have to raise taxes by 1.1 million, cut your budget by 1.1 million, or use your free cash to make up the difference. We're fortunate. We have it. So I'm using it.
How much do we have?
Well, you just spent all of it.
I was gonna say.
Because
And
you-
what's-
It was
We have
1.3.
rainy day too.
We do. So when you look at this graph, these are rounded, and this is not every single category, but it's a really quick snapshot. So you can see that $2.2 million is what your budget increase is. So if somebody just gave us a check for $2.2 million,
Be fine.
you'd be fine. But that's your budget increase. Overlay is how the assessors pay whenever somebody has an abatement or an exemption. So at your next meeting, we'll be talking about warrant articles. And you'll recall Article 5, every single year as we do exemptions, because we allow real estate abatements for veterans or blind or widows. Well, that comes out of that account. That's not a budgetary account. That's an off-the-book source account that we have to fund every single year.
Pretty much a normal overlay.
300,000,
Yeah.
no, that's high.
Aye.
And the reason for that is, one, you're going to, your primary driver of your exemptions at this point is that, one, whenever we go into a recessionary environment, more people file for an abatement. Just, that's what happens. The second thing is that as house prices increase, 1% of that valuation also increases. So, you live in a house, it's now valued at $600,000. You file for an abatement, you win, a 1% is more than 1% of $450,000. But it was the same damn house 3 years ago. But that 1% now is so much more money. And obviously on the commercial ones, because CVS,
Yeah.
Lowe's, the banks,
They
all
file
of them
every year,
file
yeah.
every single year because that's what they do. They have teams of attorneys to do it. We literally fight every year. I don't bring it back to you guys. We just do what we have to do because that's part of the process. But if Lowe's goes from a valuation of 8 million to 15 million, which are real numbers, 1% of $6 million is a lot of money. So I have to put a little bit more money in that account this year, and you're required to fund it. So I put a little bit more money in for there. There's $263,000 more of estimated costs that the state is charging us. So that's what's that $104,000 I said is a net decrease, is because we're getting $100,000 more, and they're charging us $263,000 more.
What is the 263 for exactly?
So they charge us like,
Examples?
yep, mosquito control,
Mm.
MBTA. The three larger drivers this year is we pay, the school doesn't pay this, the town pays retiree health insurance for teachers. So that's up big. And so when you put it all together, they're saying that that's our increase this year.
Okay.
So, I'm budgeting, as I've always said, I usually budget closer to 3.1, 3.2, $3.3 million in receipts. I'm using $470,000 more this year than I did last year. You see a state aid, I've already discussed that. And this is why I say our business model in Massachusetts is broken. If you raise at 2.75%, that income to the town is 800 grand. So let's assume there was no state aid, there was no new growth. What Proposition 2.5 is telling you is your entire budget can't go up more than 800 grand. One budget went up 1.1 million.
Could you
The
again go
business plan
back
just
over
doesn't
that
work.
levy, Dave?
Yeah, let me, well, okay, ask your question and then, because I
Yeah.
also provided a sheet that goes over the levy as well.
It does, so that, you mentioned the 2.5, but we're not at 2.5.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
You
So,
can sort of accumulate that over time, right?
correct. So if you
Yeah, when
have,
don't use it.
if you have, say, $20 million, your taxation levy is $20 million. Levy just means tax.
yeah,
So if you're at $20 million, you would go up 2.5%.
right,
But we only actually budget 1%.
okay,
The next year, it goes up 2.5%, not on what you budgeted, but what on the larger number was.
okay.
So over the course of 10 or 12 years, if you keep going up 1, and the top line keeps going up 2.5, you have a whole bunch of excess capacity
And
in
it
between.
accumulates,
That's correct.
okay,
So what that means is, you're not being taxed it, but we can actually go to town meeting, approve a budget that would go up, say, 5% on the levy. And I don't have to go and get a separate vote.
You don't have to get a special town meeting.
You don't need a
Yeah.
special town meeting,
5% is still 5%.
because
Yeah.
you have stayed underneath your levy limit.
Mhm.
And most other towns spend directly to
Yeah.
that levy limit,
Yeah,
and that's why more than a handful of towns this year have gone for overrides. And to my knowledge, every single one has failed. And then they've had to make real cuts. I know there's one contiguous town that their school department sent out 40 pink slips this year. I know that, it's not a guess. So,
is that
We
a
have-
one-time vote, Dave? Once you override, that's it forever? It's not like when we pay for a new school, for instance.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So there's two different terms. There's an operational override.
Right.
So say you want to go by, you say, our 2.5% is $1 million, but we need $3 million.
Right.
So you do an operational override for $2 million. And then if it passes, that higher amount is then increased by 2.5% every year forever. You would then have to go back to town meeting, do a operational, I think it's an underride. I've never seen it pass. But you would actually lower that, but I've never seen it actually done.
It's like when you get a raise at 3%, you get a raise at 3%, and next year, if you get a raise on 3%, it's on the 3%
That
that
is
you got
correct.
before.
It's
Right.
like compounding interest.
Exactly.
So that does stay on the rolls forever, because that is your new base.
Okay.
A debt exclusion, like for the
That's-
school,
That's what I was thinking.
means
Yeah.
that you take out for so much money, you borrow for that, and then after that is done, that comes off the
Comes
tax
back.
roll.
Okay.
So that is separate, that has no actual operational impact to your budget.
Okay.
It does obviously have an impact to you as taxpayers. So that's what I'm saying, our business plan is broken. Because it doesn't matter, like if everybody came in with a 2.5% increase on their budgets, I still don't know if we could keep it under 800 grand.
Right.
And it's not reasonable to think that everybody could come in at 2.5%. So, anyway, we transferred $350,000 as we normally do. Again, these are rounded numbers, but about $1.1 million is what we've done as an additional transfer. And then when it all comes out, you basically break even. Again,
So if we had been going up 2.5% every year, we couldn't do this 2.75, say, we'd have to go for an override for this $1 million,
Yes,
1.1 million.
yes.
Exactly.
Well, no, because
Oh, for
you're going up 2.75, you would have to go for an override for the difference between 2.5 and 2.75.
Okay.
And I have that sheet, so I'll show you guys what that means, it's $70,000.
When would you start tapping rainy day, if ever?
Again, I'm not a voter, But my recommendation would be is that you start tapping rainy day before you go for an override.
Yeah,
You would.
and we did tap the rainy day,
We did one
For-
time, yes.
a budget.
We-
Was it 2 years ago?
It was
2 years ago?
2021.
Yeah. And
So-
then we had to try to replenish it,
And we did.
and we did.
Because last year we did put $500,000 back in to
Yeah.
replenish it. And so I speak to that next, is that there are 3 articles on here that the Board of Selectmen originally wanted to place on, but I had to recommend them last night not to do it, and they did accept that recommendation. One is a town stabilization fund. We have attempted to always put money in there. We can't, because you're out of money. The only way you could is if you raise taxes to put money in. Quite frankly, that's what most towns do. Most towns, if you only need to use 1% to budget, like we were doing,
Right.
and you would always raise to 2.5, and then that difference you would put in the rainy day fund. A town that does it every year is Avon. Little town of Avon, because they have so much commercial, every year they raise it 2.5%, and whatever they don't use, they put in stabilization. It is just, that is what they do. But that's not the norm, but that is what a lot of times, and it's worked for them. We always fund a sidewalk account. We're not gonna put money into sidewalks this year. There is one silver lining on that. We'll go back to the millionaire's tax, is that 50% of it was for infrastructure and 50% of it was for education. We have historically received about $320,000 in Chapter 90, which is for sidewalks and our infrastructure. And this year, we're gonna receive $490. So it's up $170,000. That's outside of state aid. So I'm gonna presume that that $170,000 increase is because of what's going on with the millionaire's tax. There's no way for me to know, but it's just, using common sense. If they've gone up that much and it's the first year it's kicking in, I'm presuming that's where the money is coming from. So, I hate the fact that we're not putting our local money into sidewalks, but at least DPW will have some additional money this year from that fund to use. The last is that we all know we're going to town meeting for the MBTA zoning. I have no idea if it's gonna pass or not. If it doesn't pass, and the state ends up suing us, we're gonna have to defend it. So originally, we were gonna put money into a legal defense fund specific to MBTA, so that way we could do whatever we had to do, whatever that means. So, I don't expect that we're gonna generate a lot of free cash this current year. This current year ends on June 30th. But let's assume that we generate 2 million, just making up a number, I have no way of knowing. When that money gets certified in August or September, what I've said to the board is that if MBTA fails and the state sues us, then what we can do is we can call a special town meeting in the fall, and you can then transfer money from the free cash account into that at that point, so you have something.
If we have it.
Yeah, you'll have something.
But then if we had to use that for
Correct.
that, next year when they want a new cruiser or something, we're not gonna have the free cash to do it.
Yeah, look, I don't want to get ahead of myself on this, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this budget gets approved. I think all of our departments and all of our, the school, all the other departments, I think they're doing the best that they can with what they have in front of them. So I'm hoping this budget gets approved, but then we will have a conversation with all the departments after town meeting, that they're gonna have to be looking forward, because you are reaching a pinch point. And there's nothing else we can do. I mean, math is math. So, in reference to, I have, from a strategy standpoint, that's what I told the board, is that you can transfer in the fall. So if you want to transfer, say, 200,000 and 250,000, and say we have 2 million, that's great, we have it. It's not on taxes. The negative is, it'll be $250,000 less that you have to balance the budget later. And remember, we bought the Howard property in the fall. That was $430,000. So $430,000 had already come for free cash.
Right.
So we might be duplicating that again this year if this doesn't pass. Again, if it passes, then it's a different story. So we didn't put those 3 warrant articles in. Again, you'll be looking at warrants at your next meeting. I did want to make note, though, is that we still are better than many other towns, especially our size, is that we do have $3.4 million in stabilization. The Department of Revenue always says that you should have a minimum of 5%. And at a most ideal situation, you would be at 10% of your operational budget. So figuring a $50 million operational budget this year, it's 46 million. That'd be 4.6 million, we're about 7.8%. So we're pretty close, we're in that sweet spot right there, we're in the middle. And what we did do, because we had a choice, I could have chosen not to fund OPEB. Again, we'll be talking about articles next time. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, which is basically long-term insurance costs, health insurance costs for retired employees. We have a mandate to cover those costs. When the GASB accounting rules changed, the rating agencies now look at that to make sure that we're funding something. Because historically, municipalities have never funded that account, because as the cost came in, you just paid. So all municipalities now are under a mandate in order to be able to fund that. So we've been doing it. So we're gonna do it this year again. We're gonna put $100,000 in. It's peanuts. It's not a lot of money. But I'm doing that because we will have a vote early next year on a potential new school. And if I don't fund OPEB and our rating goes down, your costs are gonna go up. So it is not worth it not to continue the consistency of funding OPEB so we can try to get the best rate
So
possible.
maintained your bond rating?
That is correct. So
Okay.
when I started, we were at A1, we're now at AA+. So
Oh.
which is really good for a small town. It's hard to get to AAA as a town this size. But that obviously drives down your long-term financial costs whenever you bond. So taking the holistic approach, not just on this budget, but looking out, is that I think we fund OPEB, so that way if the school passes, we wanted to keep that rate as low as possible to keep the costs down.
David, has anybody beat MBTA yet?
Well,
I know, Milton voted it down, but they got sued.
correct. So
A lot
right
of
now,
towns voted it down.
They
Not
have.
just Milton.
Who did?
correct. A lot of other towns have voted it down now too.
Yeah, but are they getting sued like Milton did?
They are, so they're all in litigation. The problem with municipalities, and I hate saying this on camera, but the problem with municipalities is that everybody always ultimately worries about their self-interest. So, and I think the state recognizes this. So Milton should not have fought the state alone. Middleborough voted it down, Marshfield voted it down, Rentham voted it down, Gloucester voted it down, Hopedale voted it down, I think Hanson voted it down. I mean, a whole bunch
Halifax.
did. They should have all collectively got together and shared in the expense and then argued together. But they don't. And, I mean, because ultimately, each town worries about itself. And so it's hard if you've got a small town like West Bridgewater. Middleborough is bigger, but in comparison to the state, they're small. And it's hard for them to fight against a much larger entity with deeper pockets. We see that in the private sector, you see that in the municipal sector. So, to answer your question, others in litigation, yes. Except for the Milton case, there's been no resolution. And the resolution, the Milton case, went in favor of the state. And not surprising. Look, I've said this, and I don't mind saying this on camera. The deck is stacked against you. You could talk to any attorney in Massachusetts. I want you to think about the Milton case. They filed in October. The Attorney General skipped the district court level, skipped the appellate level,
Brought it right through.
got it to the Supreme Judicial Court. They took it, because the SJC doesn't have to take the case. They took it, and within 90 days, they got a decision.
Yeah, never happens.
Unheard of. Unheard of. I mean, that's a dream.
They
if
wanted
you are
to send a message.
Yeah.
correct. You're an attorney.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
No,
No. Nobody can skip those steps.
Isn't that illegal?
no,
No.
No.
but they wanted to send a message.
Even if it was, how are you gonna prove it?
So,
Who's gonna enforce it?
Because I'm thinking, what are individual rights? You can
Well-
skip
But there's,
appellate.
it's not, there's no individual right
It's a,
issue.
it's a different story, yeah. Okay.
so with that said, to answer your question, I am not seeing a town prevail in whatever legal defense they put
I
up.
hadn't heard of one yet either.
However, all the other ones are still in court, and I'm sure the Attorney General office is going to rest on the Milton case
Yeah.
as a precedent
As a
whenever it is. But again, she's the attorney in the room. That is only a precedent if it is based on the same facts presented.
Correct.
Somebody will have to bring a different set of facts.
And I think that's why they're not having a class action effect,
Right.
because every town has their own set of circumstances.
Except,
And that's where they think there's not strength in numbers, right? Like, so if they go after the state individually, they may have the fact pattern that wins it over or something. I don't know.
what Milton argued was that you all know that you passed zoning laws. And what Milton argued was that that was a local self-determined issue, that we were able to pass our own zoning, and therefore the state was usurping our authority. I am befuddled that that was the argument that they made. Because our state constitution says that zoning is a state right that can be I don't want to say handed down, but it can be deferred to the municipalities. So it was a weak argument. Now again, if they're listening to Milton, they'll be mad at me. But I was surprised that that was their legal argument. Things have changed a little bit though, because the state auditor has issued that the MBTA Communities Act is an unfunded mandate. And now that becomes the same set of facts across every municipality in the state. So that is something the municipalities could all join forces.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, is that what will happen is 12 towns will get together, they'll argue the unfunded mandate, each town's gonna have to come up with, say, $300,000, they'll be halfway through, and one town will say, yeah, it's not a bad law, let's just pass it and get out. And then it starts to whittle away. So municipalities have been historically bad partners when it comes to this stuff. They just have, because again, towns are managed by selectmen, and they have their own individual interests, and that's not a bad thing. But their job and their role is to protect the interests of their town. So if they can save money and get out of a lawsuit, they have that self-vested interest. So I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but you're gonna be facing this in 2 weeks because you're gonna see it, and you're gonna have to make a recommendation, and in only a month, we'll be voting on it at town meeting. And I don't wanna get ahead of myself, we'll discuss it in 2 weeks, but we do feel that we've come up with a plan that will best mitigate, if MBTA passes, will best mitigate for the town, and we'll go through that with you. In any event, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna ask you to skip the next 2 pages, because that's the budget.
Are you planning, Dave, to present any of this to the town in any way? I mean, it's a lot of information here, so,
Yeah. I really don't.
no.
I mean,
Not in its current format.
I mean, as the finance committee, I think the town should be providing a lot of deferential treatment to you. And this is what your job is
Right.
to review all of this and then to be able to speak with authority. So that way not everybody at town meeting can fully understand this.
Right.
Now, if people ask questions and they want me to go into detail and make these answers, I will. It'll be a pretty long meeting, but I'll be more than happy to do so. But, you know, the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, you guys have been working on this now for 4 months. And obviously I've been working on it every day for that 4 months. I would hope that the town meeting, although they'll have questions, would have a lot of deferential to defer to you guys. So, but, and again, this video is online, everybody's gonna see it, they have an opportunity to see it, they have an opportunity to review it, and some people have questions, they'll call me in the meantime, or they'll wanna come and speak to you guys in the meantime, and we can answer it. But I asked you to look at this sheet, because I've never provided it before, because it wasn't that instrumentally important, but I just want you to see as to what we're doing, is that when it says FY '25 levy actual, that $28 million, that is actually the amount that we taxed last year. That is not your levy limit. Your levy limit is what you would be at if you raised it 2.5 every single year. So there is a difference between your levy limit and your levy, which in this case helps us. If you were to raise at 2.5%, you would reduce your budget by $60,000. Or if I had $60,000 more in free cash, I would have used $60,000 more. but I couldn't. So I am using 2.75, so $793,000. That's what that number you saw earlier. And that's why I say the business plan in Massachusetts is broken. Because in theory, Proposition 2.5 says you should be able to raise it 2.5% and pay all of your bills. And that's just, there's just no way. That's just absolutely not possible.
Right.
Well, so what we just went through, does that include the capital items? Like, where are they?
They are not, because capital items are not part of your operational budget.
Right,
So,
but we have left enough money to fund,
yes,
should we recommend and everybody in town meeting vote on all those items?
correct.
We still have enough.
Yep, so we used free cash. 3 of you were at the capital budget committee, and then you'll remember at the last meeting, we brought it here so you
Yeah.
can see it all.
Yeah,
So all of the ones that were recommended by the capital budget committee have also, we're going to fund those using free cash. That's about $1 million. The difference of it.
And water surplus.
The water surplus handles the water one, yes.
Right.
And then, so the difference that is left over, basically 1.5 million, that is what we're using to balance this year's budget.
Okay.
yeah.
So we are doing all the capital budget items, and we are funding all the budgets, but we're filling that hole with the leftover free cash.
And it is an example, if one of those, or 2 of those, or whatever, failed at town meeting, then that money could theoretically be used for that gap as well, right?
That is correct.
Okay, it's good to understand.
I'm sorry if that was long, but.
No, no, it's all-
Necessary.
It's all good
Necessary.
information, and I hope people do watch, because it really does give you a good overview of what's going on.
So your I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay, I was gonna say, so the budget is laid out here on this page, and
Yep, so you already
the
know,
changes on the next, right?
you know, you'll remember you had all those paper copies, or you had the long digital sheet. Every year, to make life easy, is I compress it into one sheet.
Yeah.
And I provide 2 documents for you. This document is all of your budgets that will reflect the amount that the Board of Selectmen approved last night. And the second page gives you an itemization as to what the changes were and in what particular line. So that way you know what makes up those numbers.
And those changes from what they presented.
That is
to
correct.
us,
So
right?
under TA differences, that is what I recommended to the Board of Selectmen for
Mhm.
adjustments to the budget.
Mhm.
Then you'll see that they approved those changes. So it is the Board of Selectmen approval budget that is now, it is still the department head budgets that's really in front of you, but you guys are then
Right.
gonna vote on that, and then at town meeting, there will be 3 columns in the budget book. There will be the department requests, there'll be the Board of Selectmen approval, there'll be the Finance Committee recommendation. And if you recommend the same budget that the selectmen approved, then that means in this case, all 3 of those budgets would be the same. And they would all be there, so it's fully transparent to the town, so they can see those numbers.
Okay, so this is where, in the last couple of years, we just, I think we just said, we'll just talk about really anything that people, like, not go line by line, but just talk about the ones that anybody has questions on, I think is how we've done it in the past, right?
Yeah,
Last couple of years.
Right, that's correct, yes.
And
So-
approve the
so do
bottom
you-
line.
Yeah, so do you guys wanna go through each and every line? Is there any line that you wanna talk about in specific, or what do you feel like is the best approach?
I mean, I'm all set.
Yeah.
Personally,
I mean,
what
we can go
see
through the
here. I see
changes.
the changes, but,
Yeah,
they're
Yeah.
fine.
I mean, it looks like $500 came out of,
Yeah.
the planning board, and if you look on the next page, it was around the travel stipend that they requested. We're adding $90 to the insurances, is that,
Yeah.
what that is, yeah.
And our big cost is the $79,000 for the waste.
Yeah, and that I think is not quite final, but pretty close to final and a pretty good estimate, right?
Yes.
And then the benefits represents, I think, an actual rate that we got, right?
Yes.
And,
It's actually Well,
And we do have
approved at
final
7.
insurance costs?
We received an updated quote, and so, again, there's 2 months, I mean, it could still get re-rated, but we feel pretty confident in these numbers.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So 7% on the health insurance, is that?
So,
Sorry,
no, I should say this because
it's
I.
really small.
Yeah, no. So on the health insurance benefits, as you know, everybody is entitled to receive health insurance.
Mhm.
But not everybody in town takes that health insurance. I've always budgeted for everybody, because you have to.
Right.
But in order to balance this budget, instead of balancing a 7% increase, I did a 6% increase. Because again, I was just trying to find little ways that I could save a few dollars. So now, if 98% of the people want health insurance, they get it, 2%, but look,
Oh, I see, yeah.
we'll figure it out, but I mean, we've never, I
You've
cut it a
never-
little bit. I wish I didn't, and I wish I didn't have to, but we all, these are decisions you have to make if you're
Yeah.
trying to balance a budget.
And if you fund it and people don't use it, it goes back.
So that's part of what generates the free cash.
Yeah. So our free cash is probably gonna be a lot tighter next year.
Very tight.
I do. I mean, we're tracking a little over $4 million in our receipts this year, so say $500,000 from there. Departments are really good. We don't spend all of our money, say it's another $400,000 or $500,000 there.
Yeah.
We'll have a little bit of growth, so I don't know. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
like to get to 2 million, but it might be closer to 1.5, but, it
Yeah.
might be in that range.
It's just that we're using 1.5 to balance this budget, or
Yeah.
about 1.5. So
Yeah.
next year, we may not be in a position to, to do that,
I agree.
right?
I agree.
And I think we just need to all be conscious of that as we, move forward. So are there any questions on any of the changes that are being recommended, or what the Board of Selectmen voted? Do we wanna, add, cut, make any changes at all to what was presented to us? Plus what we had to change based on like the insurance rates and the contract with the trash removal and waste disposal. Does anybody have anything?
I feel confident that these numbers are well thought out
Mhm.
as presented.
Anybody else wanna chat about any of them? Questions on any of them? Jim, you good?
I'm good.
Okay. So do we wanna just take a vote on the bottom line and not do each line?
Sure.
Does that seem, okay?
So we would move to accept the 46,717,898.
That is correct.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
Second.
thanks, Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? I guess we're gonna recommend. Same as the board.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thanks for all the work, because this is not easy. It's a lot of work. And it's very well thought out.
Thank you.
So I think the next thing on the agenda is around the picture for the finance committee book. which is a
Most
little-
important item.
A
on
little
the
lighter
docket.
topic, right? So it looks like we have 3 beautiful photographs here. I think we're gonna do color again?
Yeah.
Can we afford it?
Yep, we budgeted for it.
Anybody have a favorite? Want to make a motion on one of them? They're really all beautiful.
This one looks like West Bridgewater to me. I can't figure out where the
I
other two
know.
were taken.
Which one's that, Mary?
What's the first
Beach.
I mean, I know right where that is in West Bridgewater, but I can't figure out where the other two are.
Do we have
The
any
duckling and
information,
the-
or-
I
Yeah.
do, I mean, I know the ladies in the office do, but I do not, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. That's fair.
I couldn't even tell what the first picture was for a while.
It's a duck.
Yeah.
At first
I
I
know
was
that.
like, snake?
I was like,
And
yeah,
then I'm
that
like,
was a snake too.
Then I was like,
Then I finally saw the head.
That's why I was like, I don't know.
I'm like, I don't think that's a
about
good picture.
We're gonna put a snake
On
in
the
the grass on the.
budget? That's kind of irony, isn't it? No, sorry. And then I saw, yeah.
Took me a while to figure it out too.
I wasn't gonna put a word in
With
on that one.
mine, I always favor sunsets, or, sunrise, sunset,
It's really,
whatever.
it's a really stunning photograph.
Who took that, do you know?
I don't know.
Who doesn't know?
Where is
I know it wasn't you,
Open
David, that's
water
for sure.
somewhere,
You're entirely
isn't
Where
right.
that is.
There's like a little rowboat, I think,
some of the
there.
pond.
Kayak.
It does look like it's.
It's either that
Yeah,
one or
looks like
the
the deck to me.
dam.
That Let's go with the dam.
I like the dam.
Okay, well, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for the dam picture.
Okay.
And I'll second the dam.
Yes.
Dam,
I'll third damn.
dam, dam.
Damn.
All those in favor of this picture going on the front?
Aye.
You mean the
Aye.
dam? Aye.
Maybe I should have snake
Anybody
one.
opposed?
I'll be looking for snakes now.
That's a good one. We're gonna be damned. I'll be damned. Okay, that's that. Now we have the infamous message for the finance committee book. I think in the past, they have made me do it.
Yeah.
Draft it and then I bring it here and, well, I will send it to you beforehand
All right.
to take a look at and then
That
we
would be
can
great if that's
approve
okay
it.
with you.
I am completely fine if anybody wants to volunteer to do it this year. But otherwise than that, if you want me to, I'll draft it.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you're
No,
not
really,
held-
if you want.
You're not held to any specific length either, are you?
No, I could write a
Yeah.
book if I had time, but I usually don't.
No.
All right, so I'll try to draft it. I think I can find last year's. I usually kind of sort of start with that.
And I can always send it back to you if you want.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll bring it back here next week?
Yeah,
Is
so
it next week? No, when's the next
2
meeting?
weeks.
2 weeks, which would be what,
the 17th.
April 17th?
2 week warrants.
Yeah, in 2 weeks you'll vote on your warrants. And I will tell you then, that'll be your last meeting
Yeah.
before you go into town meeting unless something special comes up. So you'll be
Okay.
voting on that message, because only a couple of days later, we'll be going to print. We need about 7 to 8 days for the printer, and they need 3 days lead time. So we'll be going, that Monday is Patriots' Day, so we have to get to the printer by Tuesday in order to make the deadline.
Okay.
Okay,
So the meeting's the 17th, right?
17th,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
17th, 6:30 probably, right?
Yes.
Same time.
Thanks for the
Same
reminders.
bat time, same bat
Yeah.
channel.
Thanks for the reminders, Jen. The emails.
Oh, yeah,
Then I was like, oh yeah.
yeah, I know. Comes up fast.
Mhm.
All right, motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Second.
I think that was a tie. Chris and Jim, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we're out, Ben, thank you.